Starting a bit now. Welcome back. Welcome. It's lovely to hear the good vibe and the chat in the room. Lots of people talking. I can really shine. Welcome back to NHS Scotland Mental Health Network Conference. Never done that before. That's very cool, actually. Wow. Welcome back. My name's Andrew Gumley, and I'm clinical lead in the west of Scotland for the NRS Mental Health Network. It's a privilege to be here to chair the next session with three very esteemed colleagues. This session is on digital health. Can I remind you our hashtag is for Twitter, or X as it's now called, is NRSMH23. Can I also remind you, you should have a little postcard that allows you to vote for your favorite poster. This is such an important award for us each year, our People's Poster Award. So I'd just encourage you to remember that and go and see our posters and vote for your favorite. What we thought we'd do for this session is we've got three speakers, each talking about digital health. We thought we would invite the speakers to give their talks, and rather than pausing for questions at the end of each talk, we thought we'd then convene a panel at the end. And that way, each of our speakers might be able to speak to some of the issues or themes or questions that are coming up today. So what I would ask you to do is, if you do have a question for one of our speakers that comes up, do make a note of it and just do hold on to it for our session at the end. And we hope we'll have around 10 or 15 minutes for a panel discussion. Thank you very much. So it's a great privilege, and I'm delighted to introduce Chris Wright. So Chris is a systems designer, technologist, and expert in digital health implementation. And for the last 20 years, Chris has really been at the forefront of digital mental health. He's National Advisor for Digital Mental Health and also head of the Digital Mental Health Programme at the Scottish Government. Chris, I know, is passionate about the delivery of innovative, high quality and sustainable digital services in mental health. And I want to make you very welcome here to talk today. So thank you, Chris, for joining us.
I was going to say morning, it's actually afternoon now, isn't it? Afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to be here and be able to kind of share some of my insights. It's always a strange thing when you get asked to come to a kind of conference like this, because I'm never sure what the relevance is of my experiences. So just to give you some context, I'm not a researcher and I'm not a clinician, I'm an implementer. And I've been working for 20 years around about the NHS to implement digital within mental health. And I think it's really interesting because obviously what the minister said this morning is there's quite a significant gap between policy and the kind of service implementation. And my job actually see also a second gap, which is around research and the outcomes of research and its implementation at a large scale. So I'm just going to give you some of my insights, but first just to give you a context of what we've achieved in Scotland so far. So Scotland is one of the kind of world leaders in digital implementation for mental health. And across Scotland, we have a national consistency around the work we do. Currently, we have around about 29 different digital treatments. So these are evidence-based treatments that people can access and complete at their own homes, covering a whole range of different conditions and clinical populations. We also have additional technologies such as the use of things like web chat to deliver CBT, but also the use of video-enabled therapy and group therapies. This is also enhanced by quite a large online offering, which is available through things like NHS Inform. And it really allows us to create a very robust system of digital mental health services. And this is really achieved through the national procurement of 5 national platforms, or 6 national platforms, which is available both locally and nationally. And what's really key about this is they are nationally procured, which means when we procure it once for the whole of Scotland and make it available to the whole population of Scotland, which is obviously really significant. And in terms of the level of usage, you can see here this lovely graph that I like presenting. I'd like to say I started my national role in 2014, and I've been working all the way through, and you can see the progression that we've made. So last year we had round about 71,810 referrals and self-referrals to our digital therapy services. So I'm just going to let that sink in. But more significantly, I think when you think about that number, that effectively means for every 3 referrals to a psychology service, 1 will now be digital. And that's a massive turnaround in relation to where we started 10 years or so ago. Patients will wait no longer than 5 working days to access these treatments. But in addition to that, we also have high levels of usage across our video consultation services and our group therapy services, as well as our online support. So in terms of online support, we're supporting around about 38,000 people a month. So really, really significant numbers, and this is a population change in relation to the services we're able to provide. But what's more important, I think, and more significant is the usage across the whole of Scotland. And this has been really a key part of what we've been trying to do in Scotland for many, many years. And it's been really important to us that when we're offering digital, we use digital in terms of what its key value is, which is the ability to access services no matter where you are. And it's been really key in terms of not just overcoming barriers, geographical barriers or technological barriers to accessing services. Equal to that, it also dictates how we select our technology and how we implement our technology across the whole of Scotland. So one of the kind of first things that we do, thinking about a large-scale implementation, is really think about the approach that we're taking. And the first part of this is really asking the right questions. And the questions are not about the digital technology that we use, but really about what's it fundamentally going to achieve in the context of our health and care services. And this is a question that we wrestle with on an ongoing basis. As you can imagine, you have an answer perhaps pre-pandemic, and it changes significantly during the pandemic, and then you have to address this question again during post-pandemic. So it's really interesting because it's an evolving landscape. But we also have to understand what are the doubts, and I think reasonable doubts to using digital in the context of mental health. And these are just some of the examples that we have. You know, is it inferior to face-to-face services? Who ultimately is asked to pay for these services? Will patients be safe using our services? And the only way really to overcome by building the evidence base and building the research as we progress with our digital journey. And as a consequence, we follow the evidence. So the first part of what we do in national implement stronger foundation level of the research, and it's been built on every single year. And this is providing a great deal of reassurance, I think, and confidence in what we're doing digitally across Scotland. We also have to recognise the kind of barriers to implementation and to large-scale implementation. It has to be said, in my role, technology is probably the least of my problems, if I was being honest, but it's about building common goals and ownership, overcoming perhaps negative perceptions to the use of digital within mental health. Equal to that, it's about organisational personalities, negative perceptions, but probably the biggest thing that we have to overcome is continued drive and commitment to digital on an ongoing basis. Digital is not a short journey. It takes a long time because you're talking about large-scale transformation. We have to also build trust, and this is a key part of what we do on an ongoing basis. So it is about those common goals, but we also have to take time to learn about our partners that are delivering digital, understand their priorities and their strategic needs. But it's also important that we respond and react, not just to stakeholders, but to those with lived experience and to the needs of the wider populations. We build trust through transparency. So we're pretty open about how digital is working, what the issues are, what the flaws are, as well as what the benefits are of digital. And what's been really key is also the ability to share knowledge and learn together. And there's a number of you that I've worked with in this room. And this is something that I'm really proud of, is the ability for all of us to go on the same journey and move through the understanding of digital as we progress. And the last thing I would say in relation to defining approach is really about being ambitious. And I think this is one of the biggest flaws in digital implementation, is we're all quite cautious. So what you tend to get is you get pilot culture. You have a small pilot with a number of individuals, but there may be tens rather than hundreds involved in that pilot. And what you'll tend to find is you'll find that your pilot is then not cost effective. It doesn't really have the impact you'd expect, or it excludes too many individuals. So it's really important that when we're looking at digital implementation, we are genuinely ambitious about what it can achieve. And what it can achieve is things like greater quality of service access, particularly geographically. We can increase choice in the treatments that we provide, but we also can improve things like quality of patient experience. And what I'd say, working in digital for a better part of 2 decades now, is digital should enable and support people and not make it harder for individuals. So one of the kind of key aspects that we've done within Scotland, we've really created a national focus. So this comes down to things like leadership roles. And interestingly enough, my role, which is a Scottish Government role, was created in 2020, so literally a month and a half before the pandemic. But it's really interesting because I'm an implementer, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a researcher. But what my role effectively is designed to do is to give us a focal point where we can build expertise roundabout, but also then to pull two worlds together, which is the digital and the mental health. And any of you that worked within mental health know that digital doesn't tend to mix very well. It's a wee bit like oil and water. But it's really important that what we're doing is pulling these two worlds together so one can influence the other and vice versa. It's also really important that we have a level of national recognition about what is the role of digital within our clinical and care settings. And I think this has been recognised as almost like a part of the policy narrative now that we have in Scotland, where we know that digital therapies in particular are going to be an ongoing requirement of our mental health services in Scotland and an integral part of what we deliver into the future. But it's also really important to understand that digital is not an isolated solution. It needs to be built alongside more traditional approaches. And ultimately, what's more significant about digital is the choice we're giving people to access service moving forward. And as a consequence of the policy narrative, we're now seeing digital being integrated much more into things like the new mental health strategy that was published this year, but also across digital policy and strategy as well. So again, really significant change of the kind of conversation we're having at national levels. And what's been really significant, I think, about the new mental health strategy is the integration of digital into the document. So it's not a standalone item anymore, it's just part of the overall conversation we're having around about policy. And for us, then, policy can be translated into national strategy, where you're looking at how do you deliver across a spectrum of needs within digital mental health, and looking genuinely at how you're accessing digital from those with mild to moderate issues all the way through to much more severe and enduring. And in addition to that, then you have to have a delivery mechanism. So in Scotland, we have the Digital Mental Health Programme, which was formally formed in Scottish Government in 2021. There was actually predecessors to that within NHS 24, and there's been an ongoing activity for a long time within Scotland. But what the national programme really focuses on is not necessarily the development of digital services, although that is part of what we do. It's the development of infrastructure and the change of culture to allow us to adopt digital more effectively. And as a consequence of having a digital mental health programme based in Scottish Government, what we've been able to do is to integrate that directly into the overall governance structure. And again, this is really significant because what it allows us to do is to continue to influence policy and strategy moving forward. Again, important access to more stabilised funding, but also to ensure that the way that we're using digital across mental health services is safe and effective. And you can see here, we sit right in the middle, but we also feed into digital and mental health governance structures. But we also report into heads of psychological services for our digital therapies work, for example. So it's really important that we're building the foundation of governance, which ensures that the quality of what we deliver is adequate. So what are the kind of key foundations for the success we've had to date? I think the first thing is we've built change over time. I've been doing this job probably longer than I care to mention. So I started in 2002, before digital mental health was actually a term that people used. So I predate digital mental health. But you can see here, we started very early. 2004 was the first digital therapy service. And it's taken us a long time to get to where we are now. But actually, there's been massive advantage to that, which is the ability to slowly change the culture and slowly build up the acceptance, but also to build the infrastructure of delivery. We've been able to develop strong partnerships across this time, and these are long-term partnerships and varied partnerships depending on the needs. So we have government policy, obviously, we have industrial partners, and there's a couple of them here today, NHS health boards, mental health psychological services. So there's a whole range of partners that we continue to work with. But what's more significant with these partnerships is we share responsibility for things like clinical governance, the management of risk, but also strategic development, policy development, evaluation. But again, I think what's key about this is the development of that drive and commitment across a whole range of different stakeholders. We do drive up adoption through cultural change, and this is done through continuous engagement and promotion of digital services. And really, it's been designed to address a whole range of negative perception and attitudes. And it is amazing how many negative attitudes we come across. And it's the same, I guess, as when the banks moved to more digital. You can see there's lots of negative perceptions about how much you would lose in that context, I think. But more significantly, I think it's about building greater knowledge and building the evidence base. So we actually are building it from a solid foundation. We also integrate digital into mental health delivery. And this is one of my key passions, I think, is we're looking at digital not as a separate entity, but as an integrated part of what we do. And it's really key that what we're looking at here is digital that can enhance service, which might be at the higher level of the tier. Also digital that can deliver service at the lower tiers. And it's really addressed based on the needs of the individual. We also have aspects of local and national delivery. And again, this is about pulling two worlds together. We have local digital services in each of our 14 territorial health boards who can deliver and develop a whole range of different digital technologies and services across their own geographical patches. These services are then tailored to that population and are able to adapt to that population's needs. So you'll find somebody working up in Western Isles probably working very differently from those in Glasgow, but it's important that you have that local delivery. So you are not looking at one size fits all. Equal to that, then it's about also engaging your national partners, such as NHS 24 and other national structures, to ensure that those that can be delivered effectively as a population are done so. And I guess the last thing, last two things, I've got two things to say, is what's really, really key about what we've tried to do in Scotland around our digital mental health is build sustainable long-term services. And again, this is a flaw of digital, is we build lovely, shiny digital things, we introduce them through pilots, and ultimately there's no infrastructure to maintain them. So part of our work then is to ensure that things like the workforce are ready. We're building leadership across our local services and national services. We have the right finance model, and funding's becoming a complicated word now. But also the service delivery is done so in the right way. So building the right clinical governance structures, the right training structures around about the delivery of digital. And a couple of examples that I've pulled out here is we now have an innovation cluster. So Joanne is in the audience somewhere from DHI. She runs this. Joanne's waving with her. Really, really important work. This pulls together a number of our kind of key areas from academic, clinical, and commercial partners. This is about developing technology for the longer term and moving into new and emerging technologies. In addition to that, we received funding this year to actually build a national evaluation structure for our digital services in Scotland. And I think this is going to be a really significant piece of work because you have hundreds of thousands of patients now running through our digital therapy services across a 5 or 6 year period. We have really, really good data, but we need to understand what the impact is moving forward. And I think what we're able to do now is look at continuous evaluation rather than snapshot evaluation, which is going to be really, really significant. I think the last thing I would say is really important that we have to celebrate our successes across digital services. I think this is key for any service development and implementation process. The graph that I'm showing you basically got me national funding. So this was my first kind of national role, was to lead an EU project called Mastermind. So just to highlight, the green bar is our targets, the black bar is what we achieved. And I presented this slide to anyone that had money. And effectively, that's how we got money in the end for the national rollout. So hopefully that's been a useful process. I think for me, it's about thinking about those next steps. I know you're all involved in research, and research is absolutely vital to everything that we do, not just around product development and understanding the needs of the digital mental health populations, but actually also thinking about how we evidence the impact of digital services moving forward, as well as really how do we integrate the aspects of research into our daily activities of evaluation and service delivery. Thank you very much.